Any suspicious death forces investigators to ask 5 crucial questions.
Who died? When did that individual die? Where did they die? What was the cause of death, and what was the manner of death?
In their search for the answers, crime scene investigators turn straight to the evidence. Clues are found in blood patterns, the presence or absence of gunpowder, and the physical nature of the wounds. Clues that have one thing in common. They expose the weapon.
Weapons don't necessarily need to be a firearm. They don't necessarily need to be a carving knife from the kitchen counter. They can be weapons of opportunity.
Weapons can be as diverse as a hammer to a block of wood to the hands of an individual.
You can't always aim a bomb the way you do a gun. It's a weapon that usually kills, maims, injures indiscriminately.
Forensic experts reconstruct the crime scene. They're hoping to identify the most critical piece of evidence, the murder weapon. Investigators begin every story at the conclusion of its last chapter. Working backwards, guided only by trace evidence, they make their way to where the story begins.
Easy, okay? We'll show it to you. It wasn't so hard. It wasn't so easy getting it, you know? It's light again. I can't get it all, Billy. It's always light with you. Huh? Why is it always light with you? I want my money!
The first clues lie with the victim.
I want my money! You get my money! And you bring it to me.
The body begins a journey, one that leads directly to the weapon. Dr. Barry McClellan heads the investigation.
It's the coroner's responsibility to investigate the body and to use the information collected from that investigation in order to determine cause and manner of death. If there are wounds to that body, we need to determine how those wounds were inflicted. That's the importance of the weapon, the history of the weapon as it relates to how it may have caused the injuries that we see on the body.
In many cases, the cause of death is the first mystery.
This one looks like an exit.
Was a suspected suicide actually murder? Was an apparent drowning victim already dead when she hit the water? Did the knife kill, or was it the beating delivered before the stabbing? But one of the first witnesses to speak to investigators is the scene itself. The blood patterns left behind begin a confession. They tell a tale of one weapon. Different weapons leave behind different sets of clues. To understand these clues, investigators run weapons through a battery of tests. Constable Craig Moore takes that information and applies it to blood patterns.
Over the last few years, I've become specialized in an area of forensics known as bloodstain pattern analysis. The close visual analysis of those bloodstains allow me to offer an opinion as to how they were caused. It's one thing to be able to go to the crime scene and look at a bloodstain on the front door of the house. That's the factual evidence. My opinion would be saying, how did those bloodstains get there?
In order to recognize these patterns at a crime scene, Moore experiments with real human blood.
In the area of bloodstain pattern analysis, it's important to do experimentation in order to conclude that your opinions are accurate. In the case of a shooting, defined as high-velocity impact spatter, it could be important to determine how far a shooter is from the victim.
To accurately reproduce the results of a shooting, Moore uses a blood-soaked sponge. It reacts almost exactly like the body of a shooting victim.
The piece of paper in front of the sponge represents a distance the shooter could be from the blood source. The piece of paper behind the sponge represents the spatter pattern that could be created as the bullet leaves the victim. In that particular experiment, I'm able to show that if a shooter is within 6 inches or 15 centimeters of a blood source, it's quite possible that there could be minute traces of projected blood stains on the gun or the shirt sleeve or the hand of the shooter.
Each weapon will create its own unique blood pattern.
The stain created through a gunshot is quite different than a person who's been beaten, say, by a baseball bat, which again is possibly different than somebody who's been stabbed. By analyzing the blood stains, we know that a weapon's been used. Now we might know what kind of weapon's been used.
High-velocity impact patterns are typically created by guns. Medium-velocity impact stains are consistent with blunt force traumas, things like crowbars, axes, and fists. And low-velocity stains are usually a result of someone walking through a pool of blood. To the trained eye, sprays, smears, and pools of blood provide vital evidence. Beyond the patterns themselves, each individual droplet of blood is a clue. Using basic trigonometry, analysts look at the shape of a bloodstain and determine its exact angle of impact. Moore designed a model to explain this theory to a jury.
The model represents a droplet of blood. It's spherical in shape. The column represents its flight path, and the base of the model represents the stain created as it impacts the surface. This model represents 67.5 degrees. This is 45 degrees. And finally, 22.5 degrees. As the angle becomes more acute, the stain becomes elongated.
This allows experts to pinpoint exactly where the spray started.
So in the case of a shooting, if somebody was shot in the head, I'm able to determine if the head is 5 feet off the floor or 2 inches off the floor. The reason for it being there, I don't know, but I'm able to place the blood source.
Blood patterns often speak for the dead.
I'm looking at the evidence around me. Perhaps the deceased is holding the revolver in their hands. However, the blood stains on the person and in the scene indicate that they weren't holding the gun when they were shot. In fact, they might have had both their hands up in front of their face in a defensive stance. I enjoy the opportunity of finding the physical evidence and being able to read it and get an opinion as to what's happened. The ability to do that is really the spark that makes me enjoy the job.
To augment their weapons training, elite tactical units learn from Moore about the science of blood patterns. In a range set up for tactical maneuvers, he constructs a living room, soaks a sponge with blood, and goes through the actions of a killer.
For educational training purposes, it's sometimes beneficial to recreate a bloodletting scene, a mock scene. The student has the opportunity to actually see one, not using them to use their imaginations or to pretend or to look at photographs. They're actually standing in front of the stain, analyzing it on a one-to-one.
Using a mock crime scene gives the SWAT team another perspective on the damage that weapons leave behind.
I want you guys to look at this and try to come up with an idea as to what happened.
Something's exploding or some point of impact here, and the droplets are flying out from this, obviously from this point in all directions.
You're right. So as the analyst coming into the scene, and I see that on the wall or on the floor, I know there's been a shooting.
In another corner of the room is a distinctly different blood pattern. The elite tactical unit is left to decipher the weapon used.
Looks like somebody hit a home run,
Well, you're not too far off the mark.
and then somebody bled out.
Exactly.
There and here.
You're absolutely right. This is a beating. This isn't a stomping. This isn't somebody lying on the floor getting kicked multiple times. Okay? There's an object that's been swung through the air. That, the entire iron.
Armed with the knowledge of both weapons and their deadly results, the SWAT team is better equipped to recognize forensic evidence. It's this attention to detail that helps investigators solve even the most baffling of crimes. Cases like these keep Dr. McClellan on his toes.
The most interesting cases for us are the ones where someone tries to take a situation which is a homicide and make it appear like another manner of death. They may try and make it appear like a suicide. They may try and make it look like an accidental death by burning a house down after killing someone. Those for us are the most challenging investigations, but also the most rewarding. And it's those types of investigations that keep us alert and always focused to make sure that we're not going to miss something.
Though he can no longer speak, the victim will sometimes tell investigators the manner of his death and what was used to kill him. When a victim enters the morgue, the investigation is passed to the pathology team. Their job, to link the wounds with a weapon. Jeff Arnold has assisted in over 16,000 autopsies.
The role of a pathologist assistant in an autopsy is basically to act as an extra set of hands and eyes for the pathologist. On a daily basis, we see victims of accidents, suicides, murder victims. The job that we do here at the coroner's building is very mature, very graphic. It can be very messy and extremely disturbing sometimes, but it's a process that needs to be done. And I play an important role, I think, because I'm part of a process ultimately within the justice system that in many cases helps put the bad guy in jail. And it gives me some satisfaction to be part of that system.
From the crime scene to the morgue, the victim of a homicide takes a very specific journey. The first stop is the X-ray.
Sometimes there are things inside the body that obviously aren't visible from the outside. And we are doing it primarily in circumstances that are suspicious or homicidal in nature. Primarily, we're going to look for foreign metal objects, like bullets. And in pathology, we need to identify the locations of those bullets because we need to recover them for the firearms examiners.
I don't think we're going to have much in his limbs, but there should be at least one on his chest. So we'll get a couple of chest films and maybe one of the head.
Yeah, how about there?
Part of the process involves using scalpels and sharp instruments. We don't want to damage the bullet when we're removing it. The other times we may use X-rays is to identify the possibility of a knife that may have broken off during an assault or an attack. If there's an explosion, what we're going to be looking for are pieces of the bomb or shrapnel.
Probably a bit of jacket up there, so that's great. So why don't we get a lateral of that, but before
So we're going to document the presence or absence of those things.
Once the bullet has been located, the body is ready for autopsy.
911 call said a couple of shots fired.
No further history from the scene?
Not that we know of. We're working on that right now.
Is there much blood loss?
The person responsible for what happens to that body is the coroner.
It's very important that that body is kept under custody and in control until the completion of our investigation. So that body will be bagged at the scene. A special seal will be put over the bag so that it's clear that no one has interfered with the body until the autopsy is performed. And then just prior to conducting the autopsy, the seal will be removed in front of the pathologist, and that ensures that there's no break in that chain of evidence as far as investigating the body.
Looking at the X-ray, the projectile looks like a full metal jacket, so it's quite possibly a pistol used versus a long arm or a revolver.
In a complex death investigation like a homicide, there's many players involved, where we have experts from the police, pathologist, biology, toxicology, firearms, whoever we may need to bring in depending upon the specific death investigation. Now it's the coroner who's the quarterback for that overall investigation. So that certainly would fit with this entrance down to here, Toby, and these others being through and through.
Yeah, 3 holes in the shirt.
One of the integral links in the forensic chain is the firearms experts. The clues they gather add another chapter to the story. Since their inception in the 15th century, guns have revolutionized the act of murder. Dr. Barry McClellan sees their deadly results increase every year.
The most common weapons that we come across in our coroner's death investigations are guns and knives. And there's been a dramatic increase in the number of homicides as a result of guns, handguns, rifles, shotguns in the past 10 or 15 years, especially in large cities.
As a result, an entire division of forensic study has been dedicated to firearms. Bob Warburton has worked with guns since he was 12 years old.
My parents were both competition or state pistol shooters, so I grew up travelling around the countryside attending all these gun clubs. So it's a natural progression from being in the police service into the forensic firearm identification, where I could use my skills and knowledge of gun manufacture and the firearm industry.
Crimes involving guns could not be solved without the firearms experts.
And then they might call upon us to assist at the scene to interpret the evidence. And interpret the evidence might mean to analyse trajectories, to see which way a bullet might have come from, to see how far away a gun might have been fired from, to assist in the location of evidence that might be left at the scene.
In order to link the weapon to the crime, the gun is run through a series of tests. Every gun leaves a unique signature on its bullets. Annalisa La Calamita is an expert in the science of guns.
On a bullet, as it travels down the barrel of the gun transfers the unique markings it possesses onto the bullet itself.
Every bullet's jacket starts out pristine and smooth. Once a gun is fired, this smooth bullet spins down the barrel, scraping its sides.
So when you look at a bullet microscopically, you see what we call striations. Since every gun is unique, every gun will create different sets of striations. And essentially they look like scratches running the length of the bullet. It almost looks like a barcode.
Forensically, these barcodes provide irrefutable proof linking the gun to the crime. But to put the puzzle together, Warburton needs all the pieces. The gun from the crime scene and the bullet from the body.
We do then fire that gun into a water recovery tank, and we use water because it's a very good medium to stop bullets. Bullets are designed to travel through the air. Water offers a greater resistance than air, and it slows the projectile down rapidly without putting damage onto the projectile. We test fire the gun into the water tank, and then we get the bullet out of the end of the water tank that's come from that gun, so we can compare it to other bullets that we've recovered from crime scenes.
Both bullets are now compared under a microscope. If the striations match, there is absolutely no doubt about the murder weapon. While the bullets give away the identity of the gun, the victim's clothing can reveal where the shots came from.
When a gun is fired, it's not only the bullet that exits the barrel of the gun, but you also have what we call firearms discharge residues. So the closer that the target surface is to the gun, these deposits will actually place themselves onto the target surface.
The size and pattern of the gun residue can tell La Calamita precisely how far the shooter was standing from the victim when he fired the gun.
Now, as the muzzle to target distance increases, you're going to have less of those deposits because they can't travel as far. So at 7 feet, you don't have any of that black cloud, which was soot, and you also do not have any of the partially burned and unburned powder particles around the hole. So this would be indicative of a distant shot, until eventually you're going to have no deposits and just a bullet hole on the garment clothing. So the pattern or lack of pattern produced by those firearms discharge residues is going to be compared to test panels that we make using the suspect gun and ammunition at various distances.
Most crime scenes provide investigators with more than enough information to solve the crime. Coping with that information can be difficult.
In my experience as working as a firearm examiner, I've attended hundreds, getting close to 1,000 different crime scenes involving where people have been violently injured. I do have some very vivid images that will remain with me. I do see them sometimes at night time, but you put that aside and you get on with your job and you record the details.
But it's up to the pathologist to record the graphic details of injuries to the body. Those wounds can lead investigators straight to a weapon.
Two shots or 2 cartridges now. Found a couple of cartridges.
Wounds and injuries to the human body speak volumes. They reveal how the victim died and what was used to kill them. Dr. Toby Rose understands the language of wounds and weapons.
Injuries, for example, that occur either self-inflicted injuries by accident or that occur from one person injuring another person are of particular interest to forensic pathologists.
We got an X-ray over?
There's an X-ray over on the light box. We have certain questions that we want to answer on every case, and so the questions are the same about homicides. And the basic question is really, what's the cause of death and how did this person die?
Don't see any rib fractures or anything else to indicate the path. Okay.
So we'll be looking for one bullet inside.
Her most pressing concern is to figure out the cause and manner of death. This will lead her to the weapon.
We want to determine the cause of death, and that means the basic injury or illness that caused the person to die. Something like loss of blood or an arrhythmia of the heart, which causes the heart to stop beating ultimately.
We'll take the shoe.
In determining the manner of death, we have to consider the circumstances more. There are 5 choices. There's natural, suicide, accident, homicide, or undetermined in cases where there's evidence pointing to more than one manner of death.
The instant a weapon has been used to kill, post-mortem changes to the body begin. These changes are also clues the pathologist uses to determine what may have happened. The body temperature begins to drop, and the gradual onset of rigor mortis or stiffening begins. These changes help investigators in determining time of death. When the heart stops beating, gravity causes blood to pool to the lower parts of the body. This staining is called lividity.
And if a body is moved after this kind of staining occurs and is left in a different position, then it can be quite obvious that the body has been moved from the position in which it died.
In many cases, a killer will attempt to make a homicide look like a suicide. Dr. Rose has seen this before and isn't fooled.
We always want to be sure that we catch all the homicides. There's a famous case of a woman who was found at home, seated quietly in a chair, holding a gun and with a gunshot wound in her mouth. She was still holding the gun loosely in her hand. And the initial investigation pointed to suicide. The scene was too good.
What was missing was a condition called instantaneous rigor mortis, an instant stiffening of the body, often present in suicide victims.
In a classic case, the gun that the person used to kill himself or herself would be clenched firmly in the hand. But this was not a case of instantaneous rigor mortis because the gun was loosely in the hand. Now that doesn't happen. Guns have recoil and they will not just stay loosely in somebody's hand. And this one looks like an exit.
That's pretty...
After thousands of autopsies, Dr. Rose has a clear understanding of the relationship between wound and weapon. Blunt force injuries caused by objects like bats and crowbars. Lacerations that result from beatings. Sharp force injuries from weapons like knives. And of course, gunshot wounds.
In general, there are 2 kinds of gunshot wounds. There's an entrance wound, caused where the bullet goes into the body, and there's an exit wound, caused where the bullet comes out of the body. In some cases, of course, the bullet stops inside the body, so that there will be an entrance wound with no corresponding exit wound.
Entrance wounds are generally small, clean, round holes. Exit wounds are not as tidy.
There are classic entrance wounds, classic exit wounds, but there are some wounds that are more confusing. And so it takes a lot of experience in determining those kinds of wounds.
I feel something just under the skin here, so that could be that.
Okay, we'll start with that one. Okay. Bullets follow the rules of physics, but they can hit organs inside the body, like bones, and they can be deflected from a straight path.
36.
That looks like an entrance wound. So sometimes it gets complicated. And in a person who's had many gunshot wounds, like up to 12, so there can be as many as 24 defects, it can be like solving a jigsaw puzzle. Yeah, and I just need the distance from the head.
Processing the dead can be a demanding and soul-searching job.
It is hard to deal with death every day. One of my philosophies about it, though, is that the families of dead people deserve to have nice people looking at their cases and concerned about their loved ones as well.
Looking at the inside.
And with the observations that we make in the autopsy room and by the lab work that we order, we can almost always find out what happened. Now, it's not our job to find out who did it, if there is a who behind it, but we can certainly provide information to the people whose job it is to help them find out who did it.
Put the knife down.
But finding out who did it becomes more difficult when the very weapon that was used is destroyed. One of the most common mysteries in a homicide is what weapon was used to kill. But with one weapon, there is no mystery: the explosive. The World Authority on Bombs is located in Washington, D.C. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives.
Okay, I got good battery, full charge. Good on the cameras.
The ATF deals with over 2,500 bombing incidents every year.
Well, you're clear. You're clear. You just run it on down now.
Dave Pollard keeps a profile of each one.
On one extreme, you have often young people that just want to experiment. They've seen bombs in movies and TV, but their intent is not to harm. A little farther up the spectrum, you have those that build a device and place it just to do vandalism, to blow the windows out on the school or something. And unfortunately, we have those that want to use it as a weapon to destroy a large number of people.
To protect themselves from explosives, one of the tools used by ATF agents is a robot designed to retrieve and disarm the device. If a bomb has already been detonated, investigating the aftermath becomes the ATF's responsibility. Rick Strobel is a forensic chemist in charge of the ATF's laboratories.
A bomb is nothing more than a weapon. It's a weapon that usually kills, maims, injures indiscriminately. You can't always aim a bomb the way you do a gun. Bombs can be made out of almost anything you can think of. You can start with household chemicals and make a bomb. You can start with military ordnance and have a bomb. Everything from the simplest thing that we see, which is a pipe bomb, all the way up to and including radio-controlled bombs. So it can be as simple or as sophisticated as the bomber wants to make it.
The ATF are among the first on the scene after any explosion. When a plane hit the Pentagon on September 11, 2001, at the World Trade Center bombing in 1993, and when a moving van erupted in Oklahoma City, the ATF led the investigation.
In Oklahoma City, a usually peaceful farming and ranching, and the death toll keeps rising. At least 36 people.
April 19, 1995. A massive bomb inside a rental truck explodes. A stunned world watches as the bodies of men, women, and children are pulled from the rubble. When the smoke clears and the exhausted rescue workers pack up and leave, 168 people are dead.
McVeigh built a device. It was a large device, put it in the back of a truck, drove it to the scene. One of the things we want to do is prevent things like this to happen in the future. So by having knowledge of how that device was built, we may get information on components that are stolen, suspects that are experimenting, and by confronting these people early on, may be able to prevent something like that in the future.
Every detail of every bombing incident is carefully recorded in a giant database at the ATF's headquarters.
One of the questions often asked by the investigators, have we had any others like this? Does this match what's happened in an adjacent state? We had an incident out in California where the perpetrator used a spark plug, not common, and we were able to use that to link the different crimes done by that particular perpetrator.
To combat the criminals who make these lethal weapons, the ATF sends their agents deep into the heart of Virginia.
In the next evolution shot, we're going to be using the MS surface delays. Each one of these detonators will be 100 milliseconds.
The objective, to produce agents who understand the mechanics of every type of bomb imaginable.
Priming point. Get our stuff and go down range.
Agents who know how to destroy bombs if they are found.
All right.
And who can decipher evidence from the aftermath. When a bomb goes off in the U.S., the ATF sends a fleet of trucks specially designed to respond to a bomb site, the National Response Team. Steve Avato is one of the team's elite members.
A lot of people who would set fires or commit a bombing think that all of the evidence will be destroyed in those incidents, when in reality there is a lot left. Our training allows us to go into those scenes and look for minute particles or clues that would tell us how either the fire was set or the bomb was set off.
The processing of a bomb site is surprisingly low-tech. What looks like a pile of dirt holds crucial evidence.
When the National Response Team arrives on location, we're going to begin sifting through the scene, looking for the forensic evidence left by the device. We'll be looking for what type of container the bomb may have been in. We'll be looking for how the device was powered, if it was battery powered, or if a fuse was used to ignite the device. We'll be looking for the fragments left by the device that would tell us how it was made and maybe who made it. This is the evidence for the lab.
In the ATF labs, forensic evidence reveals the signature of the bomber.
One of the things we look for in forensic science is something that is unique, something that's identifiable maybe with only one person or one criminal. In a bombing incident, what we'll look for many times is the signature of the bomber. You can have a whole host of bomb components, but very rarely will different bombers put them together in exactly the same way.
Of the 500 cases that arrive at the ATF's labs, 80% are pipe bombs. They're so common because they're simple to make.
There's a lot we can tell about a pipe bomb after it's gone off in a blast. In other words, if a pipe bomb goes off and the pipe ends up fragmented in this fashion, it tells us that there is a low explosive used and that low explosive had a rather low velocity. If you contrast this pipe bomb post-blast, you can see that this fragment being smaller and also has fractures that are much sharper and sharp-edged. And this tells us that there was a high explosive event that occurred inside this pipe.
Here, forensic experts reconstruct the bomb.
And it's very much like putting together a jigsaw puzzle, except this jigsaw puzzle has missing pieces, and the pieces are burned and charred and maybe scattered over a very large area. So it's our job to start putting the puzzle together.
Though lab technicians are far removed from the scene, they are still touched by a bomb's devastation.
We'll see the remnants of some of the personal effects of the victim come into the laboratory. We may look at clothes or other personal items, and that really makes it hit home for us. That really gets us motivated, and you actually feel like you're making a difference. You're making something good come out of something bad.
Making sense of tragedy can be the most demanding part of a forensic investigation. But to solve the crime, experts must rely on one thing only: the evidence. From the crime scene to the morgue, the physical evidence tells the tale of a murder weapon. It's up to the forensic investigators to keep an open mind and let the crime scene speak. The clues they gather not only lead to the criminal, but prepares them for the next time someone decides to kill. It's the dedication of these frontline investigators that ensures no stone is left unturned.
The physical evidence actually speaks a story. I don't have to pay too much attention as to alibis, where people were, why they did the things they did. I look at the physical evidence and actually determine what happened.
Criminal investigation constantly adapts to recognize the evidence left by every type of weapon. It's a calling that demands people dedicated enough to cope with their deadly results.
I think one of the most favorite, most satisfying moments in the work that we do here is when we figure it out, when we figure out what it was that the bomber did. We figure out how he put his device together. And at that point, we know that it's just us and the bomber that knows the answer to all the questions that are out there.
It's like all jobs. Sometimes a job is rewarding, sometimes exciting, sometimes it can be mundane. Unfortunately, I've got the personality of being a reporting scientist that I take satisfaction and enjoyment out of the mundane. There does come a downside, and that downside is attending crime scenes, attending post-mortems, where I see the tragic results of people who have been shot with firearms.
So we have to be able to somehow subconsciously separate ourselves. And I don't really know how we do it, but we just do it. People that are in this business don't come here by accident. They're here because they want to be here.
There's never 2 days that are the same. There's never 2 cases that are the same. There are always people who want the answers that I can provide. This one looks like an exit. There's the coroner, there are the investigators, and most importantly, there are the family members of the people who die who are counting on me to give the answers about what happened to the deceased.
Methodically answering all the questions raised by a death can be the catalyst for prevention.
Even from those most tragic events, things can be learned, recommendations can be made, changes can be made, which would make a similar death less likely to occur in the future.
Using the clues that weapons have left behind, investigators work their way backwards from the last chapter to the first. The tiny building blocks of forensic evidence reconstruct the crime, exposing the weapon and the criminal.